differently. And they said, quit thinking that we went to Sunday school when we were growing up and tell us what you're talking about. So there was a flood. It's talked about in Genesis 9. And at the end of it, there was a beautiful rainbow that came out to give hope. And it was supposed to be a covenant between God and people, that he would never do that to the world again. And that he would remember the covenant with them. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind. And I'm going to ask y'all to go ahead and turn to page 15 and stand up, because this starts off right, it just like from the very beginning. There's no break to it. ECLA pastor in Colorado.
When I was in graduate school studying to be a counselor, our professors taught us how to listen using our third eye. That is an odd expression. How can you listen with an eye, and who has three eyes? I learned that developing a third eye means learning to watch yourself even as you pay attention to the person who is talking. When watching myself, sometimes I had an emotional reaction to what clients said. My third eye noticed my reaction and then asked whether my reaction was a natural response that anyone would have. Most of the time it was, but sometimes clients reminded me of incidents in my own life. This reminder could trigger a flood of memories and emotions, good or bad, which may have little or nothing to do with the client. In these cases, it was critical for me to identify with them quickly and then put them aside so that I could hear the client themselves with a clearer mind and heart. I did not realize it at the same time, but developing a third eye has been extremely helpful in my own life, far beyond a therapeutic setting. My third eye helps me better understand my own reactions to everyday life and develop more thoughtful, less reactive responses, especially in emotional situations. My third eye keeps me safe. It helps me see things as they unfold and deal with emotional situations more rationally. I still experience my emotions, but my third eye allows me to choose to reveal them or not, depending on the situation. That can keep me from showing vulnerability when it isn't safe, or help me share vulnerability when it is safe and appropriate. But it does something even more important. My third eye allows me to grow spiritually by keeping me in the present moment. While it is easy to get caught up in memories of the past or imagination for the future, the third eye can only focus on the present moment. What am I saying, doing, and feeling right now? Remaining in the present moment keeps me grounded in reality. Let's face it, this present moment is the only thing that is actually real. Thinking about the past or the future are things that happen in my head, but which aren't real to anyone else. Too often my memories or imagination get distorted by a narrowed focus, and I lose perspective. Focusing on my third eye grounds me. Developing our third eye not only helps us cope with the real world, but it is also a spiritual practice. Much of our spiritual journey is spent learning to engage with God directly and intimately. It is too easy for our images of God to become our gods. When that happens, we begin to pray to our ideas about God rather than engaging with God. Our third eye watches our conversations and openness with God and warns us when we stray. God uses our third eye to gently call us back where we can re-engage with God in real time. Sometimes re-engagement means opening our hearts, minds, and souls to God's loving presence, and then allowing the presence to soak into us, transforming our perspective into God's perspective. Other times it means opening our hearts to a new direction or practice toward which God is drawing us. Still other times, re-engagement means letting go of our images of God, even when there is nothing to take its place. We wait in stillness as God prepares the soil of our soul for new seeds. All of these ways of engaging God are only possible when we encounter God in the present moment, and that is only really possible when we develop our third eye.
If you would, stand again and let's turn to page 154 in the hymnals and use the language that's in the hymnals rather than what's going to be on the screen. The one in the hymnal is much more inclusive, and I could not find it anywhere where it was recorded that way. So I think we know what our mission is, to get some of these recordings going that actually have the inclusive language in them. Be all else to us, save the Jewish synagogues. So it's going to be part about a Nachum ish Gamzu and his disciple, Rabbi Akiba.
Nachum ish Gamzu had endless faith in the Almighty. He was certain that anything that happened to him was good. He knew that nothing happens by accident or chance, that nothing happens without God knowing it. Now God is good, therefore how can anything bad happen? Of course, unpleasant things sometimes do happen, but that does not mean that they are bad. For example, medicine may be quite unpleasant to swallow, but who would say that medicine is bad because it is unpleasant? Nachum used to say in Hebrew, this is also for good. For example, Rabbi Akiba, a disciple of Nachum ish Gamzu, had a narrow escape from death. He was on his way to a city when the sun set and he had to take shelter in the woods. It was a dark night. He lit the only candle he had. He also had a cock with him to wake him early in the morning and a donkey on which he rode. Now a strong wind blew out his candle and he remained in darkness. The next moment, the cock was snatched by an animal of prey and a similar fate befell his donkey. Each time Rabbi Akiba said, all that the merciful one does is for good. Having the commitment to look for the good in any outcome is called looking with spiritual eyes. In the morning, when Rabbi Akiba arrived in the city, he learned that a band of vicious robbers had passed through the forest and attacked the city. Had they known of Rabbi Akiba's presence, he would have suffered violence in their hands. So it was good that the candle's light was blown out, that the cock was not there to crow, nor the donkey to bray. God is good, not the source of evil. Everything that happened in the world should therefore be good. And indeed, originally, as it comes from God, it is good. However, by the time it actually takes place, it may for some reason result in bad thing. For example, a loving father gives his son a toy to play with. That's certainly a good thing. But then the son gets hurt by the improper use of it. That's bad, but it's not the father's fault. The father wanted his son to enjoy the toy.
When we look at Hebrews 11, 1 through 3, we're reminded that it's important for us to see not from an egotistical standpoint, but with spiritual eyes. We can get very caught up in the moment when what we're looking at is just reacting to whatever is coming to us at that time. But haven't your eyes ever played any tricks on you? Our brain is actually created to do several things. One is to keep you from looking at things that might distract you and put you at risk, and to help you make generalizations about everything. So there are a lot of gaps that our brain fills in. So what we think we remember is what we remember plus how the brain has acted to either fill in or filter out. And then you start putting experience and everything else on top of it. So we're designed to be imperfect. And we need grace for ourselves and each other, and we have to keep that in mind. We also have to keep in mind that we need to depend on God. That leadership has to come from the light within. And if we can't discern that leadership, then we have to try to get ourselves around people who can, and to center down and try to find whatever way works for us to connect with our inner light so that we can be led into the right directions. It's an old saying that the spiritual journey is an unlearning of fear and the acceptance of love. And you see this from the very beginning when a baby cries. sees the light and it's hit with cold air and it's dry and it's not surrounded by water anymore. What is this? And then you hand the child, you swaddle the child, and you give the child to the mother, and you hear it quiet and feel love. So our whole life, beginning there all the way to the end, is this whole thing between love and fear. Being with my friend as she died this week, I see it not just in birth, it happens in death as well. But it happens all the days in between. So we're not made to just rely just on our senses. If we did that, if we just relied on what we could see or feel or smell, we would probably do pretty well as far as survival goes. But we wouldn't do well as far as connections to other people go. And we wouldn't do well for having a wonderful human race to be able to rely on and to help judgment that is more compassionate, more loving, more kind, more considerate and thoughtful of one another. So sometimes we have to back away from sort of the senses that are there to protect us from fear and rely on, as Julie said, a spiritual life. Take a step back. We're reminded in 2 Timothy that survival, that God hasn't given us a spirit just for that. It's not that God doesn't want us to survive. We are definitely supposed to use our senses and make good decisions with them. But at the same time, we can depend on power of love and self-discipline. We can make sensible and good choices. We can take a step back and allow ourselves to be more considerate of one another. And I don't know if any of you had any situation this week that happened to you where you had to take a step back. But if you're out and among people, that probably has happened whether you recall it right now or not. You can't just say whatever's coming out of your mouth or off of your fingers. I've heard people blame that on God's Spirit, and that's not it. The Spirit of God helps us to be thoughtful. Yes, we are asked to be prophetic at times. We're learning about in our book, Hidden Wholeness, how to be prophetic without scaring people. How to do it in a compassionate way. So what does it mean to look spiritually? Does it mean looking for grace in a situation where you just don't generally see any grace? Or looking for that of God in somebody that you're like, I don't know. I'm so angry with what they're doing right now, I can't see God. Are looking with love in any situation that you think is devoid of it? If you search, you can find it. Where there is good, there is God. This is a training video in a way. And you'll tell that it's from Australia. But it's about the power in relationships to take a step back.
What have you been doing all day?
Me and Madison made cakes, didn't we, Maddie?
Yeah. Okay, what we talked about is you were going to clean the kitchen today.
I did, but then we baked.
Look at this mess.
The cakes taste good though, and you have to get a bit messy, don't you?
Fine, but I'm stuck at work all day, and for once I would come home to a clean house. But no, you couldn't do that one thing.
Well, it was clean. Maddie, you remember when it was clean? Maddie, tell your mum about when I cleaned the kitchen.
Did your dad clean the kitchen? Properly?
I can't remember.
Come on, Maddie.
Oh
my dear.
Look at the living room. Doesn't look like you cleaned in there either.
Maddie was making necklaces. She had all her beads and stuff laid out.
Why are you making excuses?
I'm just telling you what happened. Maddie, do you remember? I asked if I could hoover, but you had all your jewellery stuff laid out.
Don't drag her into
Then
it.
don't call me a liar.
I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just saying, if you did clean this place, you did do a very good job.
Maddie, will you tell your mum it was clean before we baked?
I don't know.
Of course you do. I get that you work hard. I do a lot too. I just get so annoyed when you don't believe me.
I feel like I missed out on all the fun, and then I have to clean up after you as well.
I get so caught up in I messed up. I don't see what it's doing to Maddie.
I shouldn't have pushed you. Not in front of her.
If we could have that conversation again. Maddie, tell your mum about when I cleaned the kitchen.
Did your dad clean the kitchen? Properly?
I can't remember.
Stop. See through their eyes. It's okay, Maddie. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry.
What happened?
Don't make excuses. Say how you feel. I think the day just got away from me. I know you probably had a tough day too. I tried to get everything done.
I don't mean to pile it on you. It's just I love coming home to a clean house. But it's alright.
I'll start cleaning up now.
Did you have a fun day?
We had a great day, didn't we, Maddie?
We made cakes.
Did you?
Yeah.
Perhaps your mum would like to try one. Well, that went better.
It's easier when we listen to each other, isn't it?
I think we just like things done a certain way.
Maybe we have to let some things go.
Yeah. I shouldn't have asked Maddie those questions. It wasn't fair.
We've both been stressed lately. We should probably talk about that. But not in front of Maddie.
As human beings, I'm sure we've had those kind of interactions at least once this week. Where you have to step back and try to see the world through the eyes of the other person. Where you're looking for that of God in that other person. You're relying on that of God to speak through that other person. Faith that God is there in the midst and able to talk to us and lead us forward is paramount to peace. We can't do it on our own, because if we did, we'd just be relying on ego, and ego just relies on the senses. If we look at 2 Corinthians 4:18, it says, the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. And I know that a lot of people apply this to this life versus the hereafter. But one thing that I really like about Quakerism is that it buries it in reality too. Not just what we believe, but what we know will happen. If all we do is think about ourselves, we'll stay in the temporary. But Jesus said, wisdom is known by her children. If we want something to be eternally good, we have to plant for down the road. We have to, as it said, plant a tree that's only going to give shade to somebody else. When we look at the rainbow, we talk about feeling hope. And the rainbow definitely is what we can see with our eyes, with the cones in our eyes. That is our visible light spectrum. It does remind us that we are human. But it also reminds us, or can remind us, that there is a lot that's going on that we cannot see. Look how tiny the little area is where we can see for everything else that's going on. All the other waves, the things that can be utilized for radio or microwaves or x-rays, MRIs. Believing in things that you don't see helps us to find the things that you don't see. You just sort of know it's there, and so you continue to look for it. I think about scientists that have worked hard on starting up radio waves, starting up working on radios, and how that led into us having television. And that led into us having industries that are around that, and then it just goes on and on through technology. But it's the belief in what isn't there that helps us to imagine that we could be looking for something. So we come up with these mathematical equations to find where it is, or we have gadgets that we can use that will light up or show us these other ways. And sometimes that's what we have to do spiritually too. Because there's a lot that we don't see that's going on in everybody's life, in this world. We might think, well, we know it all. We can make sure that what we know is out there. But even like, I was talking earlier about how our eyes play tricks on us. We don't even see magenta. We do because our brain tells us that we do. But even the pink that Judy's sweater is, that's not actually going to be picked up with your eyes. Your brain does that by mixing the colors together. And if you weren't human, your dog sees things differently than you do. Your cat sees things differently than you do. You see, and people attribute what they don't see to spiritual nature. We had a cat that was in a nursing home in Raleigh where I worked doing hospice work, and that cat would go into whoever's room it was that they were passing and be with that person. But there's a lot that goes on. There's people that come in, there's lots of emotion, there's lots of warmth. There are other things that the cat could see, we can't see. But because we say to the cat's seeing spirits. The cat knows that this is going on or that's going on. It's actually science. But I don't see a big division between science and God. God made the rules of science. God made us be able to see some things and cats and dogs to see other things, and gave us the wisdom to be able to find how to put things together so that we can see what we can't see with the naked eye. And then we found ways to even when we don't see this well, our regular vision, we have easy appliances to put on our faces so we can just look and find it. Can we do that spiritually? What would that look like? Would it be prayer, discernment, practicing grace in all situations? I mean, self-discipline is discipline. It means you put yourself in those situations and you keep working out. If what you're going to do is work out at a gym to build muscle, and you refuse to go to the gym, the muscle will not just appear because you want it to. Self-discipline is the same way. We have to actually work towards being able to see with that third eye. And we have to go beyond what we want to be God. We want to be the ones, I've seen it with my own eyes, so therefore it's true. Or I haven't seen it, so therefore it isn't true. There's a lot that we don't know and we don't see. We know just very, very, very small amount of everything. We don't know how everything works in the universe. We're how many years into this virus now, we don't even know how it works. I'm on several medications. They fell over and found out by happenstance that they work. I'm on the infamous hydrochloroquine, and it works great for lupus. But they only found that out because they were giving it to people who were building the Panama Canal to keep them from getting malaria, and suddenly the ones that had arthritis didn't have arthritis anymore. And they still don't know why it works. And that's why it makes it good snake oil for snake oil salesmen to say, well, you know, use it for this. This is the right drug for that. Sometimes we just don't understand how things work. We're human. We have very, very small brains compared to God's infinite wisdom. If we look further down in John 14, where it says that the world couldn't accept Jesus because they neither see him nor know him. They could see him. He was walking among them, but even to his last day, his disciples who had been with him for 3 years could not step back and look with the spiritual eyes. They either ran or denied. The only ones that stayed around were the women. And it seems like we don't think about how much we're like them. We call ourselves Christian. We think we're going to do great, great, great things, and that's not how it goes. We still have to rely on Jesus. We have to try to see Jesus, and there are several ways to do this. One is to put some blinders on. Try to focus yourself. These new gadgets, and it actually raises kids' ability to comprehend because it filters out all the noise around them. They can't hear, they can't see, so they can just do really well by having these kinds of blinders on. What do we need to be filtering out spiritually so that we can focus on Christ more? And I know you think, well, that's a little much saying that you're going to focus on Christ more. But just think about the two parables or stories that we have about Jesus on the Sea of Galilee where there's a storm. There's one where he's in a boat and he's the peace in the midst of a storm. Everyone else is reacting. And he's saying, has anybody tried prayer yet? Should it be the last ditch effort, but unfortunately it is. We have another story where Peter sees Jesus walking on the water, and Jesus says to him, "Come on, Peter, get out of the boat and walk to me." So Peter starts to walk, and then what happens? It's a storm like this, and he sees the mist coming off of a really bad wave, and it scares him. You can't focus on love and fear at the same time. It's impossible. If we needed to give ourselves a better way of having spiritual vision, if we needed to make some changes in our lives or pick up new practices for self-discipline or other things, how would we do that? And if we did, could we finally live out the commandments that Jesus said were the most important? Could we finally love God with all our heart and our soul and our might? Can we finally love our neighbors as ourselves? Could we find a way so that we could actually live this out? I like this particular quote because it pulls it all back together again. And just like Gamzu said, God is always good. After the great hurt and defeat in your life will come your greatest gifts and will bring you joy. Like the rainbow after the storm telling you now, go and enjoy your life. For in everything is this life. God is always good. We can try to find the good. We can try to find the rainbow. We can try to find what we see. We can try to find the faith that there's more than what we see. We can try to find the hope that that brings about. Because many times when we're hopeless or feel hopeless, it's because we're not looking through our spiritual eyes. We know that through God all things are possible. are all Carson Heights clear? Thank you, I appreciate y'all coming out and be careful.